Lakshman in Chidambaram, and I head the key verticals for the Americas.
Hi, I'm Jordan Hyman, and I head Wall Street Journal Custom Studios.
I'm Trevor Fellows, and I'm Chief Revenue Officer at the Wall Street Journal.
Good morning, my name is Arvind Malhotra. I'm responsible for a couple of our emerging verticals in the US and our Latin America business.
I'm really interested in healthcare. I mean, we're all interested in healthcare, but I've recently had the experience of having two operations 5 years apart, identical operations. I tore my meniscus. And what struck me, using the same hospital and the same surgeon, was just how different the technological experience was. What was once clearly heavily paper process orientated, everything, I walked into the hospital now, everything seems digitalized. Is that something you're seeing across the industry?
Well, Trevor, you ask a very interesting question, and I want to preface it with what we're seeing. There's been tremendous growth and progress in networks, analytics, cloud, security, and sensors. And with this, with this growth in technology, it's enabled us to create services, I wouldn't even call products, services that transform the way people live and work. Coming specifically to healthcare, I think part of it was spurred by Obamacare and that gaining teeth.
Yep.
Today, insurance companies realize that they have to own the entire value chain end to end and keep costs low and pass the benefits on to customers as well. So they've started buying hospital chains. And now if you look at the hospital chains, there are so many things that can go wrong.
Right.
Yeah, you have scanners, you have so much of hardware within the hospital. Now, intelligent hospitals is becoming the norm, where the prices of sensors have gotten lower and lower and lower.
Yep.
I believe that they'll hit great low price points, making wider usage possible. Sensors will be fixed within each of the devices. The devices are connected to each other, and we'll be able to collect real-time data, which will give us intelligence on whether an equipment is going to fail, and give that data to us well in advance. And now with big data and analytics coming into play, we will be able to do preventive, predictive maintenance. So there's lesser downtime. Your operation theaters are available more often than they were before, so on and so forth. The other thing is, earlier the first experience you had to go back to the hospital every time, right? And today, with again sensors coming into play, and with the mobile devices that you have, we do remote monitoring of patients all over the globe. We have nurses and doctors not sitting in the hospitals or operation theaters, but actually sitting in a back office location, really looking at the real-time data. And the key goal here is to catch the patient before they hit the emergency room. Because once they hit the emergency room, the costs go out of whack, right? And so we are now doing real-time analytics for hospital chains in the US, in Asia Pac, so on and so forth. So that's another great development. And that's why your difference in experience the second time vis-a-vis the first time.
No, that makes a lot of sense, but I'm intrigued by the fact that a lot of hospitals around the world have different levels of sophistication in their equipment. Some are going to have MRI machines that are a couple of years old, others are going to have legacy systems. How do those hospitals that have perhaps got older equipment really take advantage of this? Or is this going to be somewhere where the advantage flows to those people investing in hardware now?
So, Trevor, again, a very interesting question. There's going to be a huge aftermarket involved in this whole thing. So you'll be able to retrofit any legacy product with a sensor and enable them. What we are facing in the market, interestingly, is some very leading medical devices manufacturers don't want to be open. They believe that their power is in controlling all the data that flows out of the machine and keep it with themselves and not opening it up. And there are other manufacturing companies, medical devices manufacturers, who want to be more open, and they are challenging this monopoly.
Now, the internet's taught us over the last generation that actually data should be as free as it possibly can, within the bounds of confidentiality, that the ecosystem works best when developers and companies can build and invent new products and systems.
So you're absolutely right. We are very confident that these bastions will fall.
Right.
And fall quickly, rather than later. And it's better for the larger medical devices manufacturers to just understand this reality and embrace it before someone eats their cake.
I mean, presumably as a patient, if I've been treated, for example, in New York and I'm on holiday in Arizona, and I suddenly have to go back to the hospital, I want that data to be able to flow and the information to be widely available and to be compatible.
And with electronic medical records becoming a reality, the government mandating it, those will become, there's still work to be done, but the medical community is in a hurry to get there.
So that opens up a sort of the broader question, which is consumer power seems to be one of the driving forces of all technological change at the moment. If you look at Uber, for example, that's become as popular as it is because the advantage to the consumer is so palpable. Do you see across the industries you're working in this level of consumer power being a big driver of change?
Oh, absolutely. You know, before I get to the consumer, I just want to add to what CTL said. And in the industrial side, we're seeing the same thing. So these large companies now, they used to sell heavy equipment, big assets like turbines, engines, planes, and they have sensors on all of these devices, so they can basically give you predictive maintenance and reduce the cost for you and for them. So we are seeing huge impact because of the digitization, exactly on the grounds that CTL mentioned. Now, to answer your question specifically, what we are seeing is disruption, right? So Uber didn't exist a few years ago, Airbnb didn't exist a few years ago, and with the digital technology and in the future, we'll see more of these industries being created that are based on technologies that we haven't even seen today, like virtual reality may create a new industry, and that's what we are all very excited about.
And if I can add just one more point here, you know, earlier we had a vertical called manufacturing, another vertical called healthcare. We're seeing all these begin to collaborate in ways we never saw a couple of years ago. For example, we believe that healthcare will play a big role within the car, the connected car that's panning out.
Sure.
So you get into your car, the car is personalized, and it tells you, listen, Trevor, you missed your health checkup by 2 weeks. And your nearest approved clinic is 10 miles away. And if you refuse to go for your health checkup a few times, it sends a warning signal that, you know, there's disaster waiting to happen.
Your insurance agent, which is presumably another sector that starts to see this, the banking and insurance sectors, presumably.
The only complexity here is who really owns this data?
Right.
You know, everyone's talking about how we can use the data, and as long as you strip the names and, you know, the sensitivity attached to the data, you can really use it. But still, there's a lot of debate as to who owns the data, and we'll see more. I think we're seeing government regulations struggling to catch up with the pace at which technology is moving.
Yeah.
That's intriguing, really intriguing, isn't it? Because the advantage to the consumer is huge, but there, in many cases, they've got to weigh up the pros and cons of their data being shared. Do you, at a sort of corporate level, do you see that corporations see the advantage of working with open partnerships so they don't get locked into only buying equipment from one manufacturer in 5 years because the data won't be compatible? Was that your point earlier about the fact that this will all be open? It gives everybody more choice down the road.
I was talking to the chairman of one of the largest hospital chains in the US, and he was so sick and tired of being tied to one ERP system end to end, which is completely locked.
Right.
Which is good for the
owner of that system.
The owner of that system, but it's not good for the hospital and definitely not good for the users.
Right.
They want to break the monopoly and they're willing to go out of the comfort zone, bring in new players who can bring disruption into this and make that a reality. So we go to, you know, the customers wants change. And they're willing to go through a little bit of pain to make that change happen for sure.
Absolutely. So, you know, just picking up on a point you made, so we think the future is going to be very platform-based. It'll be a platform-based economy, like Airbnb, Uber, or Amazon. So they own platforms. And what they're doing is basically opening up the platforms. You know, you may have heard the term APIs. So they're offering public APIs or open APIs to connect to the ecosystem.
Yep.
So if a company is forward-thinking and if they own a platform, if it's closed today, we see them being dead in 5 to 10 years. If they have a platform that's open, they provide APIs for everybody to come in, they're going to rule that industry. So that's going to be the norm, we think, in the future.
This may be a naive question, but for a company that's going to rely on, say, an API from an Uber or an Airbnb, what comfort do they have that that API is going to be available for 5 or 10 years' time, that they're suddenly not going to see the rules of engagement changed? Is that a concern that many companies have?
Well, you know, once this revolution starts, it's very difficult to pull it back. Because ultimately, all these APIs result not just in revenue for the person making the product or services of the API, but also for, in this case, let's say Uber. Uber continues to make money. So there's no incentive for anybody to stop it once you open it and it starts growing and it starts making money.
Right.
Right.
Right. And you know, Arvind alluded to platforms, and we're seeing another trend in this whole thing. And this is another disruption that we're seeing in the market. So, you know, we're designing what's called an aircraft health monitoring system
Right.
right
Yeah.
now that captures real-time data as the aircraft flies. It brings the data in, and then with this data now, earlier we used to provide technology services. Today we are signing up for SLAs which relate to crew deployment, preventive predictive maintenance. Those are the SLAs we're signing up for. And the pricing models are changing. It's no more, you know, can you develop this to me and give it and I'll give you this much of money. It is, we'll pay you per wing, which is per aircraft.
Right. Yeah.
And the Internet of Things is a fairly complicated. It sounds easy, but it's fairly complicated.
Yeah.
And it's like American football. Not one person can carry the ball from one end to another.
True.
Right? So there's a sensor manufacturer, there's a telecom company which gives the pipe that brings in, and then you need systems integrators who can bring all this together and sign up for SLAs. And we're now seeing that in one case, we were talking to a software product company that was selling licenses, which had to be a part of the solution. And they came back and told us, we'll give you 80% discount if you buy our product before the end of the quarter. And we said, the model is changing. It's no more, you know, it's like, you know, then you're not a car salesman.
Right.
You are tied to customers' outcomes.
Right.
Right now, business outcomes. You're signing up for business outcomes and you rise and fall with your customer. And we now strongly believe, we've embraced that, and we strongly believe that if anybody in this ecosystem doesn't embrace that, that will be another disruption where you'll see those firms fall.
Which industries do you think are engaging in that mindset change the most aggressively? Is it healthcare? Is it banking? Is it finance? Is it manufacturing? Where do you see the sort of the most acceptance of that and the fiercest drive forward?
So one area where I'm seeing this happen very rapidly is in automotive. Aerospace and automotive, they are embracing it very quickly. Healthcare again, but healthcare has its own challenges with some of the bigger players not stepping up to the plate because they want to protect their revenue streams right now.
Right.
Banking has always been, they have to cut costs. You know, for example, running branches is such a costly affair now.
Of course, physical branches.
Physical
Yeah.
branches.
Yep.
So, you know, they have to reduce cost, and that's a great driver.
Day after day, fewer people use them. So what was once perhaps a marginal exercise has become less and less profitable as the years go by. It's a clear trend. Interesting. Do you think the US will be a leader in this space, or do you see the real innovation coming out of other parts of the world?
Undoubtedly, the US is a leader. And the US, there are more interesting things that are going to happen in the US because of macroeconomic conditions that we see. One is the US has become energy independent. Two is the growth of artificial intelligence and robotics have grown much faster in the last 2 years than in the entire decade before that. So we believe that manufacturing will shift back into the developed world.
Interesting.
Not all, but there's going to be a sizable shift. It will also redraw the supply chains. It will be more artificial intelligence, robo-driven type activity that will happen, right? And so we're very excited. US is at the forefront of this, and obviously the Valley is an innovation breeding playground globally, which everyone is adopting. There are other countries which are also looking at this, like India has become very hot with the startup scene now. There's a lot of activity happening in India, but very clearly, at least for the next decade, we see the US leading.
Going back to healthcare, I was intrigued by an article I read over the weekend about Robo Surgeons and how hospitals are using Robo Surgeons. This is in Europe, because they found them more accurate on cutting through obese patients. That they was finding that this was something that actually were getting higher levels of accuracy and better outcomes. And I was, how big is the Robo Surgeon phenomenon?
You know, my peer in UK, his daughter studies medicine, so he heard the same thing, and he called her and said, "Do you want to change your, you know, is it worth becoming a surgeon after studying for 8 years?" Right now, we strongly believe that robots will increasingly play a role, where they'll get right up to surgery, and you know how, you know, what all surgery can they do. I think time will tell. But there will always be the need for a learned doctor sitting there assuring the patient that everything is on track. So I don't see the medical profession or the doctors having to find new jobs. But I think increasingly you'll see robots play a role.
And that may increase efficiency, presumably. I mean, if you look at one of the big constraints in medical systems has been the supply of surgeons, specialist surgeons. So that's you're going to find that scales, perhaps. You'll be able to use an operating theatre for more hours of a day, which at a time when we see the demand for healthcare often exceeding supply in some markets, that's going to be very, very good for the consumer. Which all comes back to this notion of the consumer being a key driver in the digital transformation. And as we look at our In the Future program, one of the key things we're focusing on is the level of consumer choice and how companies can take advantage of that. Do you see that? Do you see any other industries where the consumer, we talk about hospitality, Airbnb, we talk about transportation, Uber. Where else do you see the consumer really driving change?
So before I answer that, your newspaper carried an article today about bots, right? So you talk about robots. If you remove the RO, you get to the bots.
It's less frightening that way, I think.
Chatbots.
And, and I think Facebook and others have launched this. That's the next wave, right?
Yep.
So you had the apps where you had to do work. Now you'll have bots that will do work for you. So that's kind of the evolution that's going to happen. And maybe just concluding on the robots. So robots will coexist with humans. They will perform precision work, but they won't replace humans, right? So I think that's the evolution we see. Coming back to your question about the consumers, we believe that every industry is ripe for disruption. It's hard to predict here that which one will be the next one, but I think, if you look at food safety, for example, I mean, there's a lot going on, and we have done work in farm to fork area.
Yep.
And it's all related to technology, right? So there is, sitting here today, it's, as I said, it's difficult to predict, but we believe anything that touches the food industry, hospitality, healthcare, financial services are all ripe for disruption.
Can I ask a qualifier on that? So just in terms of how far along you see your current clients, when we've had discussions about the topic Internet of Things, it's interesting because even internally here, our own CTO doesn't call it that. Right? He calls it what it does, not the name itself.
Right.
So when you get into those different sectors, are you finding that your clients and your partners have a full understanding and are using all that IoT enables? Or in some cases, are they using it but not realizing they're using it? Or in other cases, are they miles down the road and they need an education before you can even talk about what you might unlock for them?
Most of our customers are very well aware because this is business disruption for them.
Sure.
All of them realize that, I think it was John Chambers in a discussion where there were about 3,000 CEOs said half the companies here won't exist in the next 5 years, right? And so they all realize that. The rate of adoption in some is faster than the others, but all of them are getting there. All of them are open, they want to discuss, they want to learn, and they're willing to take the risk.
Interesting. And from a speed perspective, and we discussed a bit earlier, I mean, things are happening now in a year or two that previously may have taken 10 or 20. Will we see that pace continue as more companies sort of figure it out and at a quicker pace?
Probably get shorter, right? And because innovative companies are coming. Earlier, the enterprise organizations were doing everything end to end. Now the startups are finding processes within which could be disrupted. And they're going ahead and doing it. Now the enterprises are getting up and saying, am I going to watch this happen? So we're seeing interesting collaboration. The large enterprises realize that they can't really replicate a startup overnight within their organizations.
Right.
So they're not waiting to see their businesses disrupted. So some of them are offering their employees a chance to go innovate. They've set up a fund which they could develop and give the employees the framework to innovate within their four walls. This is one type of innovation that we're seeing. The second type is, enterprises investing in startups. Finding out who's coming up with a disruptive idea, putting in equity, and then allowing them to innovate in their environment, but really helping with the go-to-market. So we're seeing interesting things happen in the market.
Yeah, just to conclude on that, it will be faster, and the main reason is because thanks to Steve Jobs and others, we've given computing power to the 7 billion people on their hand, right? Which has never existed before.
Right.
So that's a revolution by itself. You have the people who have such computing power that just 10 years ago was available only in a data center.
Right.
And with that kind of computing power and the technology available, you're bound to see innovation happen at a very fast rate.
Right, right here in New York, they are removing old payphone installations
Right.
and installing, Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi, and so the speed of even those that have already adopted the devices and are using them, even that is picking up. It's interesting.
You talked about transportation earlier, and clearly any of us who drive a modern car are finding the array of technology there is extraordinary. My car is connected, my ability to avoid a traffic jam is incomparable to what it used to be 20 years ago. Where do you see the car industry going, and what's its future use of technology, do you think?
Well, our belief, Trevor, is except for taking bath in your car, you can do everything else. You can buy,
Yep.
you can sell, you can have 24 hours video monitoring come into your car as you're driving. You can provide location-based services. So sky's the limit. And everywhere within the developing or developed world, people are spending an hour or two in the car every day. That's why the healthcare guys want to offer their services inside the car. The supermarkets, as you're passing through a locality, want to tell you that there's one free for every one that you buy, and reaching it at a relevant point in time where you can act and decide. So for us, it's a very complicated piece of business. There's embedded systems, electronics, lots of stuff happening within the car. And for us, we had the benefit of our parent, the Mahindra group, and they are a major in the vehicle segment. And so they sit down with us and make us think what the customers want.
Right, that's customer-centric approach.
The customers, and that's very important, because when you ask our dreamers to come in and come up with new ideas, they come up with great ideas, but the price points are not right. So we are now able to sit down with our parent and really understand what the customer wants and do it for a developing world. And actually, it's reverse innovation. A lot of things that we'll do in the developing world, you'll now see it come into the developed world.
Well, I'm intrigued by that too. We talk a lot about Africa. You take a country like Kenya, which has really bypassed our digital development, or rather leapfrogged it. It's moved to mobile and never really moved to desktop. Do you see a lot of innovation coming out of some of these younger, more emerging economies that will translate into the US?
Absolutely.
Right.
As they say, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yep.
Right? You go into Africa, in some parts, you go to an ATM and withdraw money, you could get mugged coming out. We're far safer in the US probably, and that's not pushed us towards innovating.
There are parts of London where it's the same
At least
thing.
we have a camera, so you might be able to find the person.
We have
afterwards.
cameras. No, so there was a necessity for cell phone to cell phone
Payments. Yep.
payments, whether you're sending money to your cousin or you're buying some. So they got on to and India, for example, when they got on with GSM, which is the latest form of technology.
Yep.
In the US, we're still stuck with some older technologies. So that's one. Two is the largest populations are in China and in India.
Yep.
They will spur innovation. They may not have enough money to eat 3 times a day, but they still have smartphones in their hands. And now applications, are being designed to cater to their interests, and a number of them will also find their way into the developed world. So for sure, we are going to see a lot of innovation happen in the developing markets, and that reverse innovation at a lower price point will find their way into developed markets.
So CEOs really should be looking at what's happening around the rest of the world and thinking about the lessons that they can learn from that, and seeing key trends. Not everyone, but key trends coming out of some of these more mobile-centric economies, you think? Because mobile's clearly going to be the heart of everything we do.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think just to pick up on what CTL said, also, thrift engineering, right? So these countries don't have all the equipment, all the capital available. So they come up with ideas that are really innovative because of the thriftness that they have to display. So that helps spur innovation as well.
What else should CEOs be thinking about? If you were to be placed in front of a room of the 200 CEOs that come to one of our conferences, for example, and you were talking about preparing for the next 10 years, what's the advice that you would give them?
I would really think of ways my business is going to get disrupted with not even the Internet of Things, Internet of Beings, because it's going to touch each and every person all over the world. How is it going to affect my business? And start thinking from there and saying, what are the disruptions, and be bold enough to cannibalize some parts of your own business. It's better you disrupt it rather than allow somebody else to disrupt. And embrace, be open to change. They always say be mature and act like adults. I think we are at a time in the world when we should act like children, because children adapt to change much faster.
True.
Now that's a really interesting point about this adaptability, because you guys have a lot of insights from world-leading companies. Do you find that let me ask, when they get their employees, because a lot of change has to come bottom up, I think, in the new mindset, the new disruptive economy that we're going to be in, a lot is going to be driven bottom up rather than top down. What mindsets do these companies share, the successful ones that you work with across sectors?
So, being open is number one, right? And the fact that every company should wake up in the morning, or the CEOs especially, should wake up in the morning and say, what will happen for me not to exist? And once you answer that question, you start building a roadmap to make sure that you're protected, or at least you're trying to protect against this disruption that's going to happen. And I think the willingness for the companies to adopt employees from all segments of society and let them live they want to. So to give you an example, a lot of companies insisted on the employees joining and using their own laptops and secure devices. Now it's BYOD, bring your own device. Everybody's used to a smartphone. They want to use applications that way. So I think just getting that culture in your company is going to be very important in the future.
What about global growth? So, there's an essay part of the In the Future series, and that 1 to 2% number is thrown out as perhaps the new norm. But here we are talking about the Ubers and the Airbnbs that are, disrupting and growing rapidly. Is 1 or 2% GDP growth, is that a good number for a developed economy going forward in what we're now seeing?
Yes, 1 or 2% seems to be right, but there will be disruptors who will go at a much, much faster pace. Apple has shown us, and now we're seeing Airbnb, Uber. There'll be new players who are embracing the real new, who are embracing the Internet of Beings, who are going to come up with innovative ideas, which is going to really allow them to grow in an unparalleled fashion. So we'll see those growth stories happen for sure.
And piggyback to that would just be jobs. Speaking of jobs, but not the man in terms of employment. Has all of this, has this global digitization and rapid adaptation, has that changed the roles that the people that you work with and the types of jobs that you're seeing across industry?
For sure, a number of lower-end jobs will go. Let's take technical help desk, for example.
Sure.
40 or 45% of the calls that come in are, saying that I've forgotten my password, which is now handled manually. That'll go. Right. And so we are expecting robotics to phase out a number of low-end jobs. It'll also open up the creation of more high-end jobs. For example, data scientists. They're not easy. It's like probably Brad Pitt and Matt Damon rolled into one type of roles, right? So where you really need to have an inquisitive mind, understand data analytics, understand your domain, and be able to have qualitative conversations at the CXO levels to uncover business problems. So you'll have new jobs at the higher end getting created, and so we'll see, both happen.
Yeah,
would be my view.
sure.
Right, and I'll just add that technology is being on the forefront of every boardroom, right? Previously, you had the CIOs who were playing the function of a back office. They were largely optimizing cost.
And being facilitators, effectively.
Exactly.
Yep.
And now many companies have elected to go with a position called CDO, or Chief Digital Officer. And this individual is on the table with the CEO of the company and defining the strategy of the company as opposed to a back office. So there is a mega shift going on in the industry.
Yeah.
I think we're at the early stages, and the next few years will be very exciting about that.
It's interesting you say that. We write a lot, and actually write a lot for that role which really brings the CIO and CMO together. Once upon a time they were very separate roles, but there's not a marketeer in the world now who can live without close cooperation with their colleagues in tech. And vice versa. There's not a CTO in the world who's not thinking about what do my actions mean for our marketing and our customer acquisition. This merging of roles within the CXO is really interesting.
Absolutely, and we're seeing this happen across industries. No industry is spared. And the interesting thing that I hear from our CIO friends is that increasingly being called to board meetings. they're involved in business decisions that have been taken along with the chief marketing officer, the chief digital officer. So these three, CXO profiles are really coming together to help the CEO be successful.
It must seem daunting from the outside if you're a large, say, manufacturing company who have had a fairly stable, secure market for the last few years. The investment, both intellectual and financial, that you have to put in must seem at times overwhelming. What advice would you give to that, if you will, rather traditional company who is seeing disruption move ever closer? What's the first thing they should do?
They should look at, first of all, they should understand that the new normal is already in play, right? With the Internet of Things falling in place, that's a new reality. And go back, as we talked earlier, and embrace this change. If you don't, you're going to get butchered in this new world, right? And I was with a company that manufactures elevators, and they were saying, we manufacture dumb elevators, right? How am I going to differentiate? How is the Internet of Things going to affect me? And there are some people who say it's not going to affect me. I'll make some minor changes and hope, by God, everything works well.
Yep.
This company is really looking at, they gave us data for a downtown Boston building, high-rise building, for the last 10 years. So when we analyzed the data, we found that, the lifts were dumb lifts. They were, whenever someone presses, say, come to the 25th floor, it goes up. But now they're finding that, between 3 and 5 in the evening, certain floors require the lifts more often. So now pre-programming is done so that the lifts are already there at that time. So you save energy, you qualitatively improve the life of people in the building, so on and so forth. So each business has to start thinking in that fashion.
If I may just add, I think, businesses also have to survive, right? So you just can't give up your core.
Right.
So
Yep.
you have to take this two-step model approach where, step one is BAU and step two or path two is this. So I think what we are seeing a lot of companies and even IT organizations following this two-step model, right? Where you focus on the lights on and then you do the other stuff in parallel. So that's another big trend that's happening as we speak.
So with that model, who wins long term? Is it, so in financial services, is it the Betterment and the Wealthfront, or is it the Schwab and the Vanguard that are then sort of essentially trying to join the same game and disrupt themselves in many ways? Or do they both have a place in this future?
Well, I think both have a place, but my point was really that an organization itself needs to divide itself into two.
Got it.
So within the same organization, like for example, Ford is focused on building cars and delivering value, but they also have a huge organization that's looking at all this car of the future.
Yes.
And how do I play in that? GM took a position in Lyft.
Yes.
So they're all, taking hedging positions
Yeah.
to deal with this economy.
And trying to inculcate that mindset into employees that they've got to disrupt themselves, to your point. It's all about seeing what the future risk is, what somebody could do so much better, and doing that before it's done to you.
Oh, absolutely, and the key thing is to create a culture of innovation within the enterprise. And in our case, we have 107,000 people. A majority of them are under the age of 27. So how do you attract them? How do you retain them? Even the color schemes on the office have changed.
Based on data, presumably.
Based on data.
Yep.
Right, and now crowdsourcing has become a big initiative.
Yep.
Going beyond roles that are specified, putting out ideas and problems and allowing people to get back to you freely get back to you, creating the infrastructure and the platforms required where people can, give their ideas to solve common problems. All these are becoming the norm of the day.
This flattening of the enterprise is really interesting, isn't it? The way that a young employee, perhaps only been there 9 months, can get an idea to the CEO very quickly, because based upon their different way of looking at the world. Not all companies, of course, have the management structure set up for that. They may have the technological structure, but they've got old ways of doing things. There are protocols, and it's intriguing to me as to how you can inculcate that sense of energy from bottom up, and how you can make sure those ideas flow through.
Well, it starts from leadership, right? So
Right.
I think if the leader is progressive and believes in that, then the examples you give happen very rapidly. So we deal with a lot of companies. One of them is a card service company. The leader is very progressive, and so the innovation is happening a lot in that. Similarly, in some of the manufacturing companies. So the technology is there, but the culture has to.
The culture has to follow the technology.
If I can add to what Arvind was saying, our chairman, Anand Mahindra, wants the Mahindra Group to be amongst the 50 most admired brands globally. That's a vision.
Yep.
And then that gets driven right through the enterprise.
Right.
Right? And they have an innovation competition with the Mahindra groups where all the group companies compete. And the top 3 are selected, and those are the awards that are celebrated. And we in Tech Mahindra, have said, how are we going to ensure that we win the best amongst how do we become the best amongst the best at the top? And so we have organized competitions for innovation within our enterprise. And each vertical, anyone can submit an idea.
That's great.
Right? And that idea should have resulted in increased efficiency, removal of duplication of work, or a new business idea. So if you can understand your customer's business and suggest a new business idea that earns them new money as compared to saving money by cutting costs, that's the one that gets the top. So once we publicized it, we opened it up and people are excited. So they're coming in with ideas. And we let the customers choose the ideas, and ultimately what wins with the customer is then put forward to the group competitions within the Mahindra group. That's how we are encouraging a culture of innovation within our enterprise. And finally, earlier the best awards went to the best sales guys who brought in the best money.
Right.
Now we are realizing it's again American football. Not one can carry
Absolutely.
the ball.
Yeah.
It's a lot of collaboration. So now the awards go to the teams that bring out the best.
Absolutely. Same reason that we in this company sit on single floors, because we've learned that it's really about team effort, and the ability to talk to your peers, your colleagues, really drives that collaboration through.
Absolutely.
We're very happy to collaborate with you on this program. Look forward to another one of these discussions.
And we're thrilled as well. This has created a tremendous excitement in the market and within TechM, and we look forward to a continuing collaboration with the Wall Street Journal.
We're excited about it.
Thank you very much.
you both very much.
Thank you.
And let's have one more session in the future.
Look, no, we'll definitely.
Would be
We'll
great.
we'll figure out where
Would
we
be
do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.